It seems like everyone wants to reminisce about yesterday, wearing rose-tinted glasses. People like to read about history, remember the good old days of dangerous runoff and medium-speed sweepers. But history books don't get written by reading them. So in 2012, a brand new Grand Prix circuit was constructed as part of the next chapter of American motorsports. 890 acres of undeveloped land outside of Austin was constructed into a state-of-the-art racing venue, Circuit of the Americas. It's a big name, and it has to be. This place hosts Formula One, and Formula One has a different approach to using the word historic. They don't use it to describe something old. Oh no. Formula One doesn't do the past. They do the future. They look ahead. COTA built this place to be more than a racetrack. It's a multi-million-dollar entertainment facility, built purposefully with computer-aided design. The layout is a world-class thrill, if you're talented enough to learn it. It's not easy, threading through the S's, coaxing the car through the arena section, and finding every blind apex. It's a challenge unlike anything else in America. And shouldn't it be hard? Shouldn't it be tricky? They're not supposed to give everyone a trophy. If you want to be remembered, fine. Go out there and prove yourself. Finding space on the page to write your name in Speed City's history book? Now that's exclusive real estate. Welcome to COTA, gentlemen. Enjoy the ride.
Circuit of the Americas is a world-class racing facility built in 2012 for Formula One. And while it's not open-wheel racing tonight, it'll be a nearly 50-car sports car brawl for victory in two separate categories, GT4 and TCR. Tonight, it'll be a 40-minute race around Austin, Texas's 20-turn, 3.4-mile road course, and it's all kicking off for the winner, Washington, D.C. Region SCCA Virtual Racing League. With prizes on the line, including a Track Night in America entry for each of the class champions, there's a lot to race for this season. Welcome to SimTV in the Washington, D.C. Region SCCA Virtual Racing League. My name's Kyle Heyer, joined tonight by four-time IMSA winner and TC America two-time champion Tom O'Gorman. Tom, welcome back. We're quite familiar with this classification and car combination, but starting it all over again, not for the Renzo Sports Car Challenge, but for the WDCR SCCA Virtual Racing League, 40 minutes from COTA.
Yeah, good evening, Kyle. I can't decide if this feels normal or weird because this was normal for a long time, joining everybody on the racetrack for virtual racing, but very real action. And then we were able to take a little break and go real racing for a majority of the summer, which was a great refresher, but it's really exciting to be back here. And as you said, it feels a little familiar, but a very different format than what we were used to. We're going semi-endurance racing, I would say, tonight for 40 minutes.
Yeah, so a 40-minute race. We've got prizes on the line towards the end of the season. We also have one of the biggest fields that we've had in a really long time for the DC Region SCCA. We've got almost 50 cars here tonight. Definitely GT4 heavy in terms of the class split. There are a couple TCR cars here. I think about close to a dozen of them. And as we approach the start of our first race of the season, lots of new names adorning this timing and scoring screen, which you can also visit at simtvbroadcasting.com/timing to follow along during qualifying and the race. So new names on the ticker, and that means getting used to new drivers out there on the racetrack as well.
Yeah, but a lot of familiar names as well, and familiar faces that we're going to keep an eye out for. But as you said, we'll get to take a peek at some new names, and I think that's kind of down to what we were just alluding to, that there was a big break in what was becoming very normal to go sim racing every week. Depending on what league you raced in, you probably had somewhere to race at least once a week, if not once every day. But it's been, I think, 6 or 7 months, almost 5, 6, 7 months since we've seen the Washington D.C. region have its virtual racing league. They had their winter season that ran pretty long into the almost spring, and now we're back. So speaking of familiar names, there's Elias Roman goes to pole with a 221 flat in that number 99 car. He was a big contender in the Renzo Sports Car Challenge, seems to be a bit of a specialist in the TCR cars here, and he's putting his foot down early.
So we saw the weather information about a little over 90 degrees there on the track, and I think the temperature is going to be something that will cause drivers to manage tires all day long. And the main difference between the GT4 category cars and these TCR cars, Tom, front-wheel drive on these, and that means all the effort is pretty much going to the front wheels. You're basically just dragging around the rear ones and slipping and sliding them around. So tire management, especially for TCR cars, is going to be important today.
Yeah, if you're familiar with Washington, D.C. racing, but you're not necessarily familiar with iRacing or TCR cars, these are Audis, but they are front-wheel drive RS3s, 2-liter, about 300, 350 horsepower, depending on the trim that they're allowed to race in. Here in iRacing, I think it's close to 350. And yeah, all the power through the front wheels. So they have to, first of all, on the beginning of the race, get the tires in the back warmed up just a little bit. And then, as you said, manage the front quite a bit with that over 300 horsepower going through the front tires and a very, very hot track. You know, it's only going to get hotter here down in Texas. 90 degrees already, and I bet we'll see that creep up and up and up as there are not very many clouds in that sky.
Yeah, VMAX about 138 miles an hour. Big slide there out of the rear tires for Murphy Nichols. Getting the tires warm will be a big discussion tonight. The GT4 class cars will qualify here and starting in about 8 minutes, but the TCR cars will get the first 15 minutes of this qualifying session. So we'll run through some of the names. You already checked on Elias Roman, who consistently has been one of the quickest drivers in these cars at the top of the board, a 2:21.029. John Chrissy, the fourth, out there right now in second with a 2:21.866. Then Forrest Landy, Daniel Hurtas in the number 9 car is out on track right now in fourth. Murphy Nichols, who we're just looking at, Sebastian Landy is here. Will Robbins we're familiar with, and a few more down towards the bottom of the order who have not yet put down laps. Charles Boley in the 39 is also here tonight in a bright magenta car. He has not yet laid down a time. David Alessi is back in the 36. Familiar livery on board this car. With John Willeman in the 42 also working his way around. Again, we're going to have just under, I think we're going to have 11 of these TCR machines, front-wheel drive. As the GT4 category cars are going to have about 40, maybe a little bit less than that. So the GT4 cars, again, are the blue backgrounds with the yellow numbers, and the TCRs are the yellow backgrounds with the blue numbers.
Looks like a majority of these... Oh, go ahead. Majority of these TCR cars finishing their first laps now, and you see the ticker in the upper left-hand corner showing 22 minutes. It's actually a full 25-minute qualifying session, but split in half, kind of manually by the admins of the series. So around halfway of that 25 minutes, we'll see the, or was it 30 even? I'm not sure that I remember, but we'll see the TCR cars all manually pull off the track, and the GT4 cars, as you said, a huge field, is going to be taking to the track, and that's also really key because even though it's a 40-minute race, it's kind of a long time to sort yourselves out a starting position, especially with coming into the S's for the first time here at COTA. You want to be single file, but the less cars around you, the better.
Speaking of the S's, I think this is probably a good time to perhaps go over a track map here at Circuit of the Americas. 20 turns around here, so it's not a simple layout. Take me through a lap at Circuit of the Americas and what drivers will have to deal with here tonight.
Well, you start off by driving at a wall, and it looks like a wall as you're coming up to it, but it's a huge climb up to turn number 1. If you've watched on TV, it doesn't do it anywhere near as much justice. But that on the right side of your screen is the front straightaway approaching turn number 1, and actually continues to rise as you come around the almost 180-degree corner, and peaks at track out, I should say. Then you sweep down turn 2, and turn 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 all influence one to the next. It's a huge slalom if you're an autocrosser. It's a huge almost downhill skiing slalom, but it gets bigger and sweepier as you transition each one of those corners. Then down into turn 11, you get a little bit of a breather. There's a really big braking zone where the track gets wider as it sweeps down to the apex. Really invites people to make some moves that may or may not pay off for them, but then you get a breather down the back straight into turn 12, another one of those corners that gets wider as you come into it and then narrows up as you exit into what we call the stadium section. Turns 12, 13, and then 14, 15 arcing back on each other into the 3 triple apex carousels of 16, 17, and 18. Really fast sweep into turn number 19, which is always a little slower than you want it to be, and then turn 20, a final hairpin to wrap up the lap.
So again, it's not an easy lap. It's pretty complicated, in fact. And I think the latter half of the racetrack is a lot tighter than the first half. You were carrying a lot of speed and momentum through the first half of the racetrack. Then you get to the backside, Tom, and it gets really tight, and that's where a lot of the contact ends up happening. And with a nearly 50-car grid tonight, I think contact and staying out of trouble on the opening laps is going to be a big issue for a lot of these cars. Maybe not so much in the TCR category, but in GT4, I think it's going to feel very claustrophobic.
Well, you're definitely right. This track is definitely got two personalities to it, as you talk about the S's at the beginning, where all the corners are influencing one another, and you're really kind of connecting everything together. Then you get a pause down the back straight, and the second half of the track is much more point and shoot. And I would almost say you're racing the track for the first half of it, and you're racing the other cars around you for the second half. As we take a ride here with Daniel Huertas, he's going to come under the turn 2 bridge, or turn 3 bridge into the S's, and you're going to see that even though the track is fairly wide and there is a lot of runoff as well, there's really not a lot of opportunity to go side by side. And if you do go side by side, you got to make it count, because you're going to lose a lot of time to the cars around you, especially if you're chasing down leaders and you want to catch them. Going side by side here through the S's is a good way to hemorrhage a lot of time.
And looking from high above here, this is a really good time to point out something that is going to be a big topic of discussion today. Looking down at the racetrack, we're going to pause this right here. This white line, that everything from here on over is fair game. Everything from here on out is not fair game. This is all runoff area, and you will get yourself incident points, Tom. So keep yourself on the blacktop tonight, and it's the blacktop between the two white lines, and the curbing is counted as well. So just keep your eyes out for drivers running out wide. They will get themselves a penalty if they go over the incident limit tonight.
And track limits are enforced by iRacing's internal programming, so it's not necessarily a steward sitting there determining whether or not you've gone on or off track. It is iRacing's programming determining that, and that means that you have to learn to play by its rules. And a lot of these drivers have been practicing for the week, practicing for months, or even racing COTA on iRacing for years at this point, where they may or may not kind of have a good feel for where those incident points are accumulated. But every time you go off what the game deems as exceeding track limits, you earn 1 point. Every time you contact another car, you can earn up to 4 points. And tonight's race will have a 25-point incident limit before you inherit a drive-through penalty. So over 40 minutes, you may or may not be doing a lot of tire management. There is no pit stops, so there's not a lot of strategy around that. The strategy may genuinely come down to how and when can I use up my incident limits a little bit and kind of fudge the lines, because you're not going to lose time necessarily, but if you hit that 25-point incident limit max, you're going to be driving through the pit lane, and that is definitely going to lose you time.
So across the line, John Willeman had not yet put down a time, and he will this time through a 2:24.763. I don't know if it counted, as he has not yet jumped up the board, so it might have been a dirty lap. We've got 9 drivers that have laid down time so far. Sebastian Landy has not yet gone on the racetrack. We're just actually, I think we've got one more than that. We've got 12 TCR cars total. Oh, that is correct. No, it is 12. With Louis Alessi in the 43. He has also not gone on track. They will start towards the tail of the field. And Forrest Landy's back out on track, but still the provisional pole sitter is Elias Roman in this 99. To me, with 4/10 up on Murphy Nichols, this is the driver to beat tonight.
Yeah, and that's actually a pretty big gap in TCR land. These cars really generate really close racing, and they also generate really close lap times. So if you take a look down the ticker on the left side of your screen, the majority of the field is just in the kind of the same 2-second range. Once you factor in the draft and these cars are racing wheel to wheel, that field is going to stay tight for a very long time. It really comes down to consistency. Just to put one more button on the track limit and incident point conversation, those are in effect in qualifying as well. So those drivers who may not have a lap time have probably exceeded the track limits somewhere on their qualifying lap and haven't gotten a clean one in yet.
That's definitely a possibility. We're just about ready to launch the GT4 category cars on the racetrack. If we look on the pit lane, they are waiting to be released, and it's going to be a pretty mad scramble. How important do you think is it to get a lap early in the session versus late, and does it really matter, or is it just try to find a clean lap? Is that the important piece?
Well, it's the clean lap that matters. So you're right. It's going to be a mad dash to get out of the pit lane. It looks like the 33 of, I think that's Ryan Daner, probably has the best advantage because he's the first car on pit lane from what we can see. But getting a clear lap is going to be critical, and it's, getting it early is a comfort thing. You can be pretty comfortable with the idea that you've got a lap in the books and now you can just keep lapping. But these GT4 cars also do require more temperature in the tires. They take a little bit more time to get spun up. So if you don't get that done early, or especially if you have an incident early, any reset, you kind of have to wait 2, 3, 4 laps before the car's pretty happy.
Well, here we go. Car's already leaving pit lane. as the TCR cars finish up. 15 minutes remaining in qualifying, and now it's time for the GT4 cars to qualify. There's Sam Scott in the number 98. DJ Alessandrini is here tonight in the number 61. He is certainly a favorite alongside of Ken House-Seal, but Paul Darling is the one we're sort of watching for, and I don't know if he's made it. He is here in the session, but he's not yet jumped on the racetrack. I see a little bit of mind games going here on the pit exit, trying to plan out who wants to go first.
Yeah, I'm almost wondering if there was if they're being instructed by the race stewards to hold until the TCR cars are finishing their qualifying. I think they were, yes, they were indeed released from their pit boxes, but not allowed on the track yet. So a couple of those cars actually rushed to the track and had to pit back in. But qualifying for the TCR cars, they're finishing up their final lap, and I agree. Elias Roman is putting himself as not only the guy to beat, but almost a half a second on pole. That is a great start to his night over Murphy Nichols, Chrissy Landy, and Lausen.
So Elias Roman will be sitting on pole for TCR in the first race of the Washington, D.C. Region Virtual Racing League events this season. So he will put himself on that front row as the rest of the field is about to pull on the racetrack. Ryan Daner has already released as the rest of the field is starting to creep their way out as well. Now, did Daner release too early? That's another question to ask, but nice livery on this car as well tonight as he has come to a stop. I think maybe he's realized that he might have left too soon.
Yep, pops back into the pit lane, and that's actually a really cool throwback to one of the old Grand Am Cup cars that used to race. It was a Porsche 911 and then a BMW M3 that had that rum-bum livery on it, which was always an absolute favorite of mine growing up. A couple really cool liveries through there, and I did see Paul Darling pulling onto the pit lane at one point. He was identified as one of the cars to beat, so that's going to be a black and yellow liveried car, maybe about halfway back towards the back of the pack. But along with Ken House-Seal and DJ Alessandrini, those three have really been pretty dominant in practice. And then it's going to be who have we not seen yet and who maybe has a little thing in the back of their pocket as we come into qualifying.
So the last TCR car comes across the line. Daniel Huertas in the number 9. He has come on through as the rest of the field releases. DJ Alessandrini leading the pack up towards turn number 1, and GT4 qualifying is underway from Circuit of the Americas.
And this is a mad rush. Look at that. This almost looks like we're racing already, but looks like DJ Alessandrini, I think that's Ken House-Seal second. I'm looking for other familiar liveries as drivers don't often change their look. Yeah, it is the 23 car.
23 is
third
in
in
a
line.
Blue one. I don't know who's out ahead. It might be Alex LaRose. This is a new driver to this series. Has not run in this series before.
And Alex was really fast in practice as well. So just to kind of talk GT4 now, we've talked TCR cars, front-wheel drive touring cars. GT4 cars are the more sporting, a little bit faster, going to be about 3 or 4 seconds faster on the lap here around COTA. Starting off as a higher platform, obviously, with these Porsche Caymans and the BMW M4s, but less race modified, so they're a little bit less reliant on downforce. And we do also have that multi-make race going on here because we have what you'll see a majority of Porsches, but a smattering of BMWs. And in talking to the drivers earlier on, the BMW is certainly not the preferred car for COTA, but may be at other points in this season. So that'll be kind of cool to watch unfold over the 9 weeks of the Washington, D.C. Region Virtual Racing League. That BMW will come to life in different places. The Porsche may be weak in other places.
There's Tom Layton in the number 44. He's been really rock solid in GT3 machinery in the last season that we ran in the DC Region Virtual Racing League. So he is on track as well as Lex Kurchek. Evan Schickel was a force in the Redenzo Sports Car Challenge, which ran this combination of cars over the summer. He's out on track as well as Ryan Maloney. That is the 96. Vandrew Pilata, he's in a BMW this week. Francois Brou is in the 69 car, but Paul Darling has still not joined the racetrack, so unsure if he'll get a qualifying lap in. But there is a handful. First of all, this is a good-looking car as well. There's a handful of drivers in this field that I think can win this, but again, I think Alessandrini, House-Seal, and Darling, if he gets out there, those are the three that'll probably be battling for the checkers.
Yeah, and they're going to, again, be playing that 40-minute long game where these cars, they said they kind of fall off maybe a second and a half overall, but there's not a lot of point and tire management. So it's probably more position management than anything, as these drivers are now looking to get clear laps, starting their first flyer. Coming around, and there's Alessandrini across the line for the first flyer. Down up into turn 1, and down, I should say, way up into turn 1. As you can see, it starts to rise and continues to rise all the way until finally it crests at track out. So you can actually use a little bit of that camber to your advantage as you're slowing the car on the way in, looking up at the sky. But then it gains a little bit of banking as you roll past the apex and crest over at exit.
And watching out for these anti-cut curbs on the apexes, Tom. Those are pretty gnarly. They will send your car airborne, and let's not forget, we're in the sim world again, and these cars do have the iRacing new damage model, so you can have parts and pieces come off your car, and you're certainly going to want to stay off the yellow curbs and out of each other's fenders tonight if you want to make it to the end.
And just flirting with track limits as he exits. And there was a big pound on that yellow sausage curb, and one of the things that the drivers kind of learned in testing is that the Porsche has to be handled with a little bit more care, especially when it comes to curbing and transitions. So COTA, even though the car is quicker here than the BMW in theory, the car will not handle the curbing nearly as well, and you definitely have to drive it with a little more care than on the flip side. The BMW will definitely handle the curbing better, is definitely faster in a straight line, but also is in general just a little more friendly to the driver.
Alex Rose is in second place, and I don't think it's a coincidence that we see more Porsches out there than the BMW. But talking about the relative pace of the two cars, there is BOP. I think, of course, my personal opinion is that the Porsche is the better all-arounder. I think the BMW, when we go to some of the bigger tracks, would have more grunt. But we saw it really have an okay run at Daytona Rodenzo Sports Car Challenge over the summer. But is there anywhere on this racetrack that the BMW will have an advantage? Because I feel like some of these straightaways are long enough where we should see them at least have a little bit of a chance to breathe.
Sure, yeah, COTA definitely gets the reputation of having some long straightaways, especially with that back straightaway being so long. But the thing you have to think about is the corner before it. And the corner before it is a really, really tight hairpin where the mid-engine Porsche puts the power down and gets off of the first couple hundred feet of the corner so much faster than the BMW that it's almost more preferential to be fast off the corner. And yeah, maybe the BMW starts to chug down the back straight towards the end of that braking zone. But overall, the Porsche, the way the track layout is here at COTA, ends up being a little bit faster. And I think just having the more preferred fundamentals. Whereas when you go to a track maybe like Daytona, certainly a track like Road Atlanta, VIR, somewhere where there's a long back straightaway that isn't necessarily as compromised on the way in, the BMW can really shine.
So time's already starting to drop on the board. Alessandrini's lap time was invalidated due to a track limits violation, so Christopher Lapras jumps to the top, and he is in a Porsche this time. He had jumped, I believe, late last season in the other sports car championship we saw here on Sim TV. He had jumped to the BMW M4, but he's elected to go back to the Porsche for the beginning of this season, and currently on provisional pole with a 2:17.925. Now, Alessandrini's invalidated time was a 2:16.9, but we didn't really catch where he went off, so he could have gained time with that off-track excursion.
Yeah, that's a look at Lapras in the white and black car with the red and blue accents. He actually autocrosses a BMW in real life, so that explains why he was so eager to switch over to it the last time we saw these drivers racing in the sim world, but did the back-to-back testing and identified, you know, my pace just isn't as fast in the BMW, so I'm going to go for the win. And he currently sits on a provisional pole over Tom Layton and Alex LaRose, who are all factors big time. The fastest BMW right now is no surprise, Andrew Pilata. He was fastest for BMWs in practice as well, and he sits fourth. So you can see that they're not necessarily way out of the box, but they are still a little bit off pace from that pole sitting time.
Yeah, 2:18.380, 0.455 off from pole right now. A couple other drivers deeper in the field. Talas Sadiq in the number 45, the Martini livery, has not laid down a time. He'll be competitive. And Ryan Daner in the 33, this youngster has been so good in everything he's jumped in. He's also running Scars Ferrari Challenge right now. He's found success there pretty immediately. So I think Ryan Daner is, while he might not be an immediate contender for the race win, he might have a solid top 5, top 10 run. So we'll keep an eye on this Rum Bum car. And this throws back to when I got myself interested in sports car racing. Really cool to see this paint scheme out there.
And what's standing out to me right now is the lack of lap times relative to the number of cars that are on track. We only have, I think, what is it, 10? No, we've got a bunch of them in there, but there's a bunch of drivers that don't have a lap time yet. And that is going to be interesting because, as we talked about, the incident limit of this race is relatively low to the length of this race, and this track really breeds using those incident points up quickly, even for experienced drivers. Just now, though, those drivers who got caught out on their first laps go P1 and 2, Alessandrini and Hausil, up to the top in the 16s. They're way on pole now.
Wanted to go back and take a quick look at Ken Hausil through turn number 1 here. Watch the left front tire. He's just going to clip this inside curb. Watch the car bounce. And this has been an issue with the Porsche, is that it seems to really get up airborne and kind of hip and hop around every time you clip one of those curbs. So again, for the 23 and for anybody driving the Porsches, I would keep an eye on the apex curbs here because this car has a tendency to kind of bounce and hop around once it lands.
And that's what we were talking about. The compliance and the drivability of this car is lower than the BMW. So not only does it have different strengths and weaknesses, but one of the weaknesses is just how user-friendly can it be. So that was probably right on the limit of where these drivers with the Porsches can get away with on that turn 1 curbing. And that's the case for any time you see one of those big yellow bollards. They just have to stay away from them. I wouldn't be surprised to see the BMWs and maybe even the TCR cars pounding off of them a little bit more.
Here's a look at those yellow anti-cut curbs there right in the middle of your screen. You can see the Porsche out here keeping its distance off of those, and you can sort of straddle them in some of the higher cars. I'm not sure. You see a couple of cars going around and Porsche gets airborne there. You can straddle them with some cars. I'm not sure you can get away with it in these.
Let's see if these BMWs coming at us here. I think that might be Pilata if he's using them in alt. No, it's not. Different driver, but just on the limit of
to third of the 2:16.926, still about a half second off the provisional pole, but he has gone faster than all but 2 Porsches right now in that number 96 car. Here he is down the backstretch.
And that's a great effort, and that's another thing that comes down to if the BMW is fast enough, especially at the start, for him to get a jump and really get out in front and kind of set the pace of this race, that could make things very, very interesting. The other aspect is the way these cars use up their resources, and we're talking tires, that the BMW is going to be a little harder on its rear tires as it's trying to put power down. This is just where the BMW struggles, is these kind of point and shoot, changing direction corners. You see that big wiggle as he crosses the curbing there, still just trying to put power down. They don't really like to do that. It's not that they have crazy horsepower, but they have just enough to be right on that limit of adhesion, where the Porsche, having a little bit less power but the mid-engine platform, really shines in those kind of point and shoot changing directions. We're right on the limit, floating through the exit of that carousel.
And down into turn 19, there was a lot of discussion about this corner before we got into the broadcast here. You got to run that corner a lot slower than you think. If you charge it, you're going to go out wide there pretty much every time. And that's a one corner in real life that will catch you out pretty quickly with the track limits. People keeping an eye on it. Was there for World Challenge a few months ago, and a lot of people got penalties out in 19. So keep your 4 tires on the racetrack over there.
Yeah, big time. That's one of the places in real life they'll make an effort to actually keep an eye on things. But there's another aspect of the iRacing programming that we should mention. There is a point that you can cut so bad that it will assess a time penalty to you in the moment. And in the moment, you have to actually pull over to the side of the track, pull offline and start to slow down and bleed off that time penalty. And it will show you an indicator in live timing that you have to slow down by X amount of time, and until that penalty is gone, you run risk of getting a drive-through penalty as well. Turn 19 is one of those spots. So if you see drivers shoot way out past the green on turn 19, they may actually have to pull up over to the side down the front straightaway and back off pace to bleed that penalty off.
Well, here's a driver that we were waiting to get on the racetrack now with 2 minutes left. This being an open qualifying session, I think he'll, as long as he can get back to the stripe, he'll have time to complete his lap, but cutting it a little bit close. I think he had a midterm to take. And he has just now gotten on the racetrack, so he should get a lap time in, but he's only going to get one shot at it.
Yeah, he had a midterm that ended at 8:30, and I'm looking at my phone. It says 8:28, so he might have rushed through those last couple questions to get a qualifying lap in here. But this is the driver that everybody that I talked to was kind of saying if he makes qualifying and starts anywhere respectable, he'll be the one to beat, because he's just super consistent, really shines in this GT4 car, and Paul Darling has consistently shown that across SCCA Esports, Redenzo Sports Car Challenge, anywhere you find him in the sports car, in iRacing, this GT4 car suits him.
So we've had 34 drivers lay down times so far. We still have about another 12 to 15 that have not yet put down times. 3 of those TCR machines, and the remainder all GT4 class cars, Paul Darling included. Sam Scott is out there on the racetrack in a similar looking car. So is Kevin Zhu in the Grid Life number 243. And he's coming out of turn number 20, and across the line we'll see if he can lay down a valid time. This time it'll be a 2:19.258. It will launch him to 15th place, and he'll get one more go.
And that is, just to put a button on what you said, 17, by my count, 17 Grand Sport cars have not put a lap time down, which is obviously they're on the track, they're trying, but they don't have the opportunity to put that clean lap down. If I'm looking at the right live timing, that just tells you how hard it is to get a clean lap here at COTA and iRacing.
Yeah, there's again a handful of cars that have some sort of time, but they're below the TCR times, and so not really what I would call an official time. So 30 seconds left to go in qualifying here before our 40-minute race. We do have the potential for a full course yellow should things get messy out there on the racetrack. We'll keep our eyes out for that. And I'm not sure we'll get a chance to go through the entire starting lineup, but if we do, we will bring that to you. So Darren Heath, another driver that's new to the series, he's out there. Daniel Gross in the number 47. He's just abandoned a lap. Paul Darling is on one right now, Tom, and it's going to have to count.
Yeah, we'll have the pleasure of watching. He got about 20 seconds grace period there to start that flying lap. Looked a little bit deep into turn one, and he has the disadvantage of not having a couple laps to warm these tires up, so this probably won't be in contention for pole. But I think if we can get Paul Darling within the top 10, he will certainly be a factor for this race. And then the extra pressure is just coming down to whether this lap ends up being clean or not. Also, whether or not he catches that traffic. There's a couple of cars up there.
Off into turn number 11 and out in towards 12 now, towards the end of this very long straightaway. 3 minutes left to get and complete a time. 20 GT4 cars have laid down a time within 3.5 seconds of the race leader. That's DJ Alessandro, or I should say the pole sitter, DJ Alessandrini, Ken House-Seal. 2:16.451, the time to beat for Paul Darling. And Paul was the only person I think DJ Alessandrini was seriously concerned about. And he sort of, I say that sort of jokingly, because DJ's really good, and I think he sort of undersells himself sometimes. But if he's worried about Paul Darling, everybody else should be too.
Well, and speaking of undersells himself, Paul Darling is one of the most modest drivers I've ever run across, because he will always come into some race going, yeah, I haven't practiced. Oh, yeah, I haven't. Really undersells himself, and then comes out and lays it down and is always one of the drivers to beat no matter what we're driving. And we already talked him up in the GT4 cars specifically. So this will be really interesting to see how quickly can he turn it on. He will have practiced, but again, joining the session late, this 155 car, 2 corners to go, and I think it looks clean so far.
Yeah, so far so good through turn number 19. Nice, good run through there. Really got a time to beat a 2:16.451. It's about 0.116 between Alessandrini and House-Seal. Out of turn number 20. Bit of a wiggle out of the rear tires across the line now. Will Paul Darling lay down a time? 2:18.087. Only good enough for 10th. And this is maybe comes down to the tires, Tom. Are they the best on lap 1? I'd probably say it takes them a few laps to work in.
No, I'd say at least lap 3 if you were watching the live timing over there on the left. I think Alessandrini's lap and House-Seal's lap both popped up on lap 3. Tom Layton, I think, probably was on lap 4 when he went up to 3rd place, bumping Andrew Pilata down. So the BMW looked to have switched his tires on a little bit quicker with Pilata going that fast on his 2nd lap. So Darling, I called it a little earlier. I think top 10 with 40 minutes of racing is enough to keep that 155 car within the fold.
Well, it's going to be a wild lap number 1. We'll go over our keys to the race here in just a few moments. We'll let qualifying conclude here. A couple more drivers still trying to get times in. Those being Christopher Lapras is still out on track in the 183. He's been pretty good in this car before. Andrew Kessel is out there in the number 13 car, currently in 8th. Paul Darling just cooling down, and Sam Scott also cooling down. But Lapras might still be good for another lap here, to finish this lap at least.
Going to be close. Yeah, 40 seconds ticks by really fast with how long this back straight is. I wouldn't be surprised if he's kind of apexing turn 20 and shoving his shoulders forward in the belts trying to get across the line, but we'll cross our fingers for him.
Do you do the sim racer lean, where when you're turning you kind of lean into the corner behind your desk?
I don't think I do.
I
don't know.
I've
never been spectated as a driver in sim racing with my body.
I find myself doing that, especially in oval races when the car's really tight. You're kind of leaning over on the desk. I mean, this is not helping me at all, but it's making me feel better. So maybe that's what Lapras will have to do. And he's not going to make it. He's still working his way through turn number 15. And 5 seconds left. DJ Alessandrini and Elias Roman, your pole sitters for their respective categories for qualifying for the first round of the DC Region SCCA Virtual Racing League from Circuit of the Americas. It's all about to kick off from COTA. We'll head down to the racetrack here in just a moment and bring you the starting grid here as soon as we get the cars on the lineup here. So we'll head back down to the racetrack, have a look at our keys to the race here, Tom, and bring me the first one.
The first one is absolutely tire wear. 40-minute race, while it is not necessarily an endurance race, is something to keep an eye on in both of these categories. And we've kind of alluded to all the strengths and weaknesses of the different cars. The Porsche falls off just a little bit, but the BMW's got to watch those rear tires. And you shift back to TCR, you got to keep taking care of those front tires.
Incident management, keeping the car on the blacktop all night long, a 25x incident limit. Keep the tires within those white lines at all times, and keep yourself out of trouble, especially on lap number 1, Tom.
And then finally, surviving lap 1, coming into the S's for the first time. If you are side by side, you're in a high-risk position. The job for these drivers is to get themselves through turn 1, get themselves in the position where they can slot in and get single file as fast as possible. I think we'll see that happen for the first couple rows, but at some point it's unavoidable, and surviving going through those S's for the first time here at COTA is critical. To win the race, first you must finish.
Of course, you can follow live timing and scoring at simtvbroadcasting.com/timing to follow along in real time. And I think we're just going to let the starting grid scroll here, Tom, as we get through. But let's start off the first couple rows. DJ Alessandrini, the 61, and Ken Alseal in the 23 on row number 1 in GT4.
In the second row, it's Thomas Layton side by side with the first of our BMWs. That'll be Andrew Pilata starting alongside in the 96 car.
In row number 3, Alex LaRose, new name to the DC Region SCCA Virtual Racing League. Christopher Lapras starts 6th in the 183.
And that's a familiar one. Another familiar pair, Evan Schickel and Andrew Kessel will start in the 4th row side by side in the 37 and 13 cars.
In row number 5, Ryan Maloney and Paul Darling. Maloney in the number 8, Darling in the 155.
And then behind them, Francois Brou and Sam Scott will start side by side. Francois, a very familiar name to us.
The rest of the field, we're going to let this continue to scroll. Lex Kurchek, Tala Sadiq down here at the bottom of the grid. Greg Obadia, Jeff Miner. A lot more to go through here. We'll pick them up at the TCR field here in just a moment. 40 minutes. Is there any strategy to this race? We talked about tires. What about fuel at all? Is that a concern?
Yeah, there was a lot of factoring going on, definitely figuring out how minimal fuel can you run while making sure you get to the finish. I think as long as there aren't any surprises with just extra long green flag running where you're all by yourself and you maybe were cutting it super close, I don't think there'll be any fuel issues. I think it was pretty public information as to how much fuel to put in these cars, but you shouldn't have to worry about that. I think if it comes down to a really, really tight battle and someone went tight and someone went conservative, maybe you got 5 extra gallons on board, you might have a little advantage, but fuel should be okay.
Should have a split start here as well for the start of this race, meaning the GT4 class cars will get the green before TCR, and so that way it'll kind of hopefully minimize the amount of incidents we'll see heading down into the first corner. We know how challenging that can be. It's pretty tight, and it's a kind of blind crest as well, so if you're not able to see over that crest, it can be a pretty big deal.
Well, and it may not look tight from that angle we were just showing, but just right of frame, it gets tight. So that track expands out to 10, 11, 12 car widths wide coming in, which absolutely breeds bad decisions, but it narrows back down to its normal width as soon as you apex. So these drivers, again, surviving lap 1. That's the key.
Through turn number 19. Look at the size of the field we've got in GT4. And the TCR car is going to find themselves some space to race. Pace car pulls off. The Washington, D.C. region SCCA Virtual Racing League begins their winter season from Austin, Texas, virtually in iRacing. Through turn number 20, DJ Alessandrini and Ken Alseal on the front row. 40 minutes of racing from COTA. Here we go as we wait for the green flag to fly. Everyone lining up, double file, about 20 rows deep. There's the green flag, and finally we're racing from COTA.
Oh, that's a great jump from DJ Alessandrini. He's able to tuck in across the nose of everybody else, and there's no threat, but look at the BMW. There's a charge from Andrew Pilata. He's got 3rd.
Down towards turn number 1, 3 wide, and that's Darling up the inside to try to grab spots here early. He's gone 3 spots up from 10th to 7th through turn number 1, still 3 wide behind them. As we make it through turn 1, I don't think we've had any incidents.
That's an incredible run from Darling, but the entire field, a great effort to get through turn 1, and you can see them now making sure they're single file. We're at least single file all the way back to 7th, but someone's running wide next to Evan Schickel, tucks in, it's a big slide, it's going to go for a spin.
Car spinning around, it looks like Andrew Kessel, and we'll go back to the TCR start. Elias Roman was on driver's right because of the way things launched, but he's going to be clear as they head into turn number 1. Here's Murphy Nichols up the inside and John Chrissy around the outside trying to grab a spot or 3.
And those two are going to try to get single file now, much fewer cars, but again, these TCR cars just generate such great racing, and that's Chrissy going to take the 2nd spot away, up 1 position, and Murphy Nichols looks like he didn't get the power down out of turn 1, and there's a big spin.
That's Frank Taberzi in the 24. He's gone around more trouble up the road. Greg Obadia has found his way to get turned around. I think Ryan Maloney has also found a spill. He's way off track at the exit of turn number 10. And as the rest of the field, we're 3 wide. Oh, this is going to get dicey. Big stack up in turn 11.
Yeah, and that's what happens when you get that extra width on entry. Again, that track goes down to like 10, 11, 12 car widths wide, and then it narrows up at the apex. You think you got the room, and then all of a sudden you're driving into someone's door handle. So that's going to put all of these drivers behind just a bit. They do get 1 quick repair, which means if they drive to the pit lane and park in their pit stall, the car will get automatically repaired. They can join the race again. They're not completely out of this one, but they definitely are for the win.
There's a lot of eyeballs to stick to different places on screen. Daniel Gross has just gone around. There's another car way off there. David Thompson? No, who is that off track again? Somebody is 34 car. That would have been Brian McCrae, and Elias Roman leads the way in TCR. Side-by-side battle behind him. Peter Lowson and David Alessi. They've sorted it out by the time they get to 12.
And I suspect these drivers are choosing to not battle quite as hard because of how you have to not only bring the rear tires up, but save the front tires. It's going to be who has the most left at the end of this race, more so than who's winning lap number 1.
There's a battle between Murphy Nichols on the outside and the number 5 Smoketown Brewing Station car. Big moment there as he tries to hold on to it. Looks like Chrissy's gone through and he takes second place, but here comes Forrest Landy.
And that's going to bring Landy back into it. He's not going to be able to hold the outside, I don't think, but he's going to try. And now Nichols gets a run back at position number 2. Chrissy around the outside. These drivers feathering the throttle. Tires still not up to temp, all the way out to track out, and he's going to sweep across the nose of Nichols coming into turn number 19. If he keeps it on the track, no, that's going to be a course cut. He's going to have to pull across the nose of Nichols on the start-finish straight and start to get rid of that penalty.
And Nichols will need to understand that he ran a GT3 race here last season, and now looks like Chrissy will have to slow, so Forrest Landy will go through, Murphy Nichols will go through, as Elias Roman pulls away from the second place battle, but Forrest Landy wants P2 instead.
Yeah, and these guys are, if you want to win the race, you're fighting for the wrong position. They're starting to give a big lead up to Elias Roman, pounding that curb, a little bit of hop for for Nichols as he comes now down into turn 2. But these drivers with all that battling, look at the lead that Roman's got.
Back up to GT4, Alessandrini and House Hill. They're nose to tail, tit for tat right now. A little bit deeper in the field, Paul Darling, who started in 10th. He's grabbed all the way up to 7th spot, but he's gotten stuck now behind Alex LaRose. So the Alessandrini and House Hill cars driving away pretty quickly, and Paul Darling needs to keep pace with those front 2 if he wants a chance to win.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd give him too much. Edgar Pilata's keeping him honest, and then Leighton, Lapras, and LaRose. Darling now with the lunge down the inside. If he keeps it on the track, they're still going to stay side by side, and that's where this stadium section generates amazing racing. And no, it's going to be LaRose back to 6th. But those drivers now, as they start to race.
Oh, big dive for Tala Sadiq under Scott Merker. And Tala's not going to be able to keep it on course, and a big cut left from Merker across Francois Flipsky in the number 17 BMW, but they avoided contact that time through.
Still side by side. I'm going to get confused with that. Paul Darling's livery is out there twice, and one of them's much further back in the pack. There he is. Sam Scott is also running that same car. So he is having some fun back here, battling with this big pack for, where is that, about 17th?
Yeah, 15, 16, 17th back there. For the race lead, Ken Ausiel goes through to the top spot in turn number 20. Drag race down the front stretch, 5 minutes in, and Alessandrini is probably not going to give this up too easily here, but will they work together, Tom?
Well, if he's smart, he should. You're right, it looks like he's not going to, but actually Ken Ausiel looks like he was the one that decided to give up the position just a little bit, now cresting at turn number 1, and that brought the BMW back into the fight just a little bit. So that's why I say these drivers have to be a little careful. They're probably on the same comms channel, or maybe able to talk to each other through their microphones.
Oh,
so
man, that was
a communication
tight.
Point.
Holy cow, sorry to cut you off. LaRose chopped across the nose of Paul Darling. I don't think Darling had a real good run there, but still tried to put the nose to the inside into the S's, and LaRose said no thank you, and kept holding on to 6th for now.
And Darling is starting to look really racy. He's usually pretty mild when it comes to traffic and picking his spots, but he's starting to realize that he has to get back towards the front as the gap there. He's got the run. Going to get the run through turn number 10 and probably get Alex LaRose on the brakes down into turn number 11. They're going to be side by side on the brakes. Noses dive. Darling going to try to back him up at the apex maybe. Yes, the brake lights were on long, but Alex LaRose with the great over-under, and they get into each other. Both of them go for a ride. Darling recovers it. Schickel gets around, and LaRose goes for a spin.
Yeah, relatively minor damage from the looks of it. While that was happening, Andrew Chow found himself turned around in his Popeyes number 29. Doesn't look like there's any visible damage on that car. Jumping back briefly to TCR, Elias Roman continues to lead. Second place, Nichols and Landy, second and third. Half a second between them. 2.5 seconds back to find John Chrissy. Peter Lausen. Will Robbins is back there with David Alessi. But this battle has mostly fizzled for now. But TCR always finds a way to get back together towards the end of the race. So we'll keep our eyes back here.
It sure does. And again, I think if you remember back to qualifying, Roman had pole by almost a half a second. If he can just put in laps that much quicker than the field the rest of the race, now that he's broken that draft, he'll be pretty good. Ooh, this is getting tight.
Now this is the 98 of Sam Scott underneath Scott Merker in the 77. Behind them, Dave Fitzgerald, who's got fairly significant front-end damage. In front of Andrew Kessel, real tight and dicey here through the infield section. Andrew Kessel looks like he had gone around earlier, but I don't see any damage on that car. Fitzgerald, however, on the front of his M4. Pretty significant contact with somebody or something.
Yeah, and that's going to take away any straight line advantage that BMW has, because anytime you crimple up that front end, it's going to act a little bit more like a parasail or a parachute than it does a hood and bumper. So he gets over-undered now coming through turn number 9, but that car still looks good. I like that livery.
It does look good for sure. We'll jump up a little bit higher in the running order to find Alex LaRose in 10th after his loop. He's got Jeff Miner all over the back of him. Ryan Daner following these guys in 12th, and we talked about Ryan in qualifying. Started 20th, he's up to 12th, so pretty good start for the 33 car.
Yeah, it's a great charge, and that comes down to one of our keys to the race is surviving lap number 1. If you survive lap 1, you look like a hero, picking up all of those positions, even though he runs a fairly lonely 12th right now. He's got a little bit of work to do to put in a couple of flyers to catch up to LaRose and Miner, as they just leave frame there, leaving turn number 6 into turn 7, and this is where the S's kind of take a different change into the rhythm. Back at the front, it's still pretty much exactly the same. These guys just kind of settling into a rhythm, I think, knowing that this race is very long, only 8 minutes down with 32 to go.
Just always amazing to me how similar the players look, whether it's a GT3 car or an MX-5. It's always Alice. Actually, I would put Leighton here, even in the Mustangs. Alessandrini, Hausiel, Pilata, Leighton, and Lapras. You could mix them up and put them in any race car. They'd probably still be in a similar order. So they continue to battle for the lead, looking a little bit deeper in the field. Ruben Monsanto, and whoa, big moment for him. He's going to clobber the plastic barrier, and pieces and parts go flying. This is down towards the hairpin here in turn number 11.
And that tells you just how these cars really don't have a lot of aerodynamics. They are absolutely on the limit, even in that basic corner number 10. If you kind of crest that corner at just a weird angle, the car can get away from you, and sure enough, there it does. It starts to float to the right, overcorrects back to the left. Sorry, I got that backwards, but then loses his wing and
actually hits it here, I think. It's going to go spattering across the pavement. That's unfortunate. We'll ride on board here with him.
Just coming over this blind crest, turns in a little too sharply, and then that rear end that just starts to float. Physics says I want the engine in the front, and it got away from it.
Unfortunate. That's a pretty big hit there as well. So the 14 car going to be back rolling, missing some parts and pieces on that car. As we jump back into TCR, Daniel Gross in this 47 car was sort of in the midst of a TCR fight. He's found his way out in front of the 4th place number 6 of John Christie, but you've had experience in these TCR cars in the past. You're a winner 4 times in these, and tell me a little bit about the multi-class interaction between these GT4 cars, because sometimes the slow GT4s are sort of in the way of the faster TCRs.
Yeah, certainly, and really in TCRs, they have the potential to be every bit as fast as a GT4 car, but in multi-class racing, they do get slowed down just a little bit, and that's down to downforce. So it's less about the overall speed that you may be making, because the GT4 cars and TCR cars may be turning the same lap times, but these TCR cars are so good on the brakes, and they're really, really good in fast sweeping sections, just like the S's here at COTA. So in certain areas of this track, the TCR cars are going to be faster even than maybe Alessandrini, Hausiel, and Pilata are at the front. Then it comes down to that's just straight line horsepower. So these drivers dealing with TCR or dealing with GS cars, GT4 cars in the back, with TCR cars at the front, you kind of have to pick your spots and just do your best to not slow yourself down in trying to navigate them, because you're almost always going to get passed back down the straightaways. But as long as you're not letting yourself get slowed up too much by trying moves that are just never going to work, it's really about picking your spots and understanding when is a place that I can actually make a pass and when is a place that I really am actually better off just staying in line.
Going back up to the race lead, Alessandrini's held on to it. There's Ken Hausiel putting pressure on him. Again, I'm not convinced that this is a totally serious battle until we get to the white flag lap, so we'll keep our eyes on the front here, but I think if there's any swapping, it'll probably be amicable for now. Looking a bit deeper, we'll find Scott Merker, Dave Fitzgerald. They're still going at it, but the closest battle on the racetrack is for the top spot, except for, how about this one, for 24th position overall, 23rd in class. Cristobal Rodriguez, David Thompson in this fight.
And now we get to watch that unfold as Elias Roman, who's the leader in TCR, that 99 car, his job is right now to make sure that his overall lap times don't drop too much in getting caught up with this battle between Rodriguez and Thompson. So you see on the brakes that TCR car is really good, closes up just a little bit, and he's got an opportunity to make a move, but it's not really going to work out for him. So that probably slowed him down a bit. He's just got to be careful with not picking himself either a spot that's going to slow him down too much, or even worse, get himself hit.
Yeah, and last time by, Elias Roman was 3 seconds quicker than that 51 of David Thompson, so that was certainly throwing a wrench in his lead. But Murphy Nichols last time actually ran 0.3 better than the race leader, so I don't think this 5 car is out of it yet. I think he's got enough pace to get there should the obstructions continue for the race leader in TCR.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting to watch as the last, just under 30 minutes to go in this race. We're absolutely in the point where these TCR cars are dealing with GS cars that are slower than they are. These drivers are not there because they had incidents or anything else. They're there because Elias Roman's run them down, and they're now in traffic. Also, just looking back towards the front, as you mentioned, there's not really much of a quote-unquote serious battle at the front, and that means that these drivers are just kind of settled into their rrhythm. Oh, DJ Alessandrini, though, gets a little wide into turn 11. But just looking at lap times, everybody in the top 5 is carrying really low 2:17s. Their qualifying pace was down in the low 2:16s, so they're close to a second off of their qualifying pace, which tells me they're just kind of in a rhythm. The exception to that is Paul Darling, who was a 2:16.9 last time through and is going to start to reel these guys in pretty quickly if they're just cruising.
A little bit of a touch there from Ken Ausiel to the back of Alessandrini. Just a nudge. Let him know he's there. But Paul Darling, as you mentioned, last time by, 2:16.988, which is not quite the fastest lap of the race. It's about a 10th off DJ's best, but it was the fastest lap on the racetrack last time by. So Darling, like you mentioned, he's 5 seconds back from the race lead, but far from out of it.
Yeah, and even if he's 5 seconds back from the race lead, those leaders are all pretty closely together. So at some point, if there's a battle that ignites, he's going to be back in this one pretty quickly, starting with Lapras and Leighton.
Francois Flipsky in the number 17, having a battle here with Francois Bruce. The two Francois going after it. Ryan Maloney watching from behind in the 25 car. Here's a look.
Oh, he's super deep. He's going to have to bail out to the right and does so off the track, and it's going to open the door for the rest of these drivers to stream through. The Washington, D.C. region, the highest saturation of racing Francois anywhere in the world, I think.
that's a, the r/ brand new sentence. That would be one of them right there. Scott Merker, he's found his way off the racetrack. Here's a quick look at how that happened. He was right in front of Dave Fitzgerald. Was there a touch? Ooh, there definitely was a touch there.
Yeah, big touch, and he did a pretty good job to not go all the way around, so he's going to keep rolling there. But Dave Fitzgerald, not worried about the way the front end of that BMW looks anymore, and he's making it, turning it more into a battering ram right there.
Well, it was effective. Scott Merker back to 22nd in class and overall. And we'll head back towards the second place battle in TCR, because these guys have not really left each other. About a half a second between each of these drivers. Is this going to help them overall? Again, Murphy Nichols was a little quicker than Elias Roman last time by, but is he going to be consistent enough to run down Elias Roman without some intervention from other class cars?
Yeah, it's going to be a little touch and go, because these drivers are not dealing with GS cars that are passing them. They're actually catching these GS cars. So honestly, Elias Roman did a really good job of getting through the GS car, the GT4 cars, and making sure that he can now break away. There is Roman now coming into turn number 1, the white car just sweeping through the apex. The next 3 cars are GT4 cars, and they're having a really tight battle, maybe even a touch on exit there between the BMW and the Porsche. But the TCR drivers sitting in second, third, and fourth, they're going to have to find a way around just like Roman did, and that might take a while, especially as they're all packed together.
And into the S's again. This is a pretty high speed area, and a little mistake can go a long way here. We saw in World Challenge a couple weeks ago, as you see Murphy Nichols have to sweep next to one of those GT4 cars. Saw the S's be a tricky spot on the opening laps of races for the TCR machines just because of the lack of rear tire heat, and thankfully we didn't have any of that issue here today. But it's a fast area, and you're really throwing these TCR cars around balanced on the nose, so the rear end stepping out is a lot easier than you'd think.
Yeah, it's something to just remind you in the back of your mind that that was Murphy Nichols running just outside of those track limits, and I can promise you there was a little +1 that popped up on his screen just there. We know that the incident limit for this race is 25, and then you get a drive-through penalty. There's no way for us to know in the booth whether or not any of these drivers are even close to that, but that was a little bit of a demonstration right there that they're pushing hard, and you got to be careful with that. Now this is getting racy.
And that's Forrest Landy in behind Murphy Nichols into turn number 12. I love watching these TCR cars on the brakes because they move around so much. The rear ends just kind of pick up off the ground when you stick the thing on its nose in the braking zone. It's a spectacular thing to watch.
Yeah, already about over a 60% front weight bias over the front axle of these cars. And then when you hit the brakes and physics throws the weight even further forward, they say the rear wheels are just along for a ride. In the braking zones, they really are not doing much. Fighting the brakes and stability, and that's about it. But these drivers are playing it pretty smart. Whether there's opportunity to race or not is aside from the point. They're not slowing each other down by going side by side, and even though Elias Roman is continuing to pull away just a little bit, they're keeping themselves in the fight if anything were to go wrong for Elias.
Ryan Daner in 12th, Tala Sadiq in 13th. Tala started in 13th spot, and he continues to run there. Ryan Daner has gone 20th to 12th and then stopped there. So the progress has come to an end, and now he's going to have to start driving out the rearview mirror at some point.
A little behind coming through turns 8, 7, and 8, so he's probably feeling the pressure from the 45 car of Sadiq just behind. Sadiq is hunting side to side, goes for the outside. Defensive move for the 33, and deep on the brakes for Sadiq, going to go for the big major over-under, uses up all the track, and he's going to get a good run. They're probably going to end up near side by side by the time they get to the end of this back straight. And look at Daner still protecting all the way to the back, or all the way to the driver's left of this long back straight. Here comes the draft. Doesn't really do much until you're in about 4th gear or 5th gear in these Caymans. Grabbing 6th just before the braking zone, looks to the outside. I don't think he's going to be able to make this happen on this lap.
Oh, big dive from Andrew Kessel, and there's a touch, and around goes Tala Sadiq in turn number 12 after a contact from Kessel. Just got in too deep, and once you're in the ABS, Tom, it's pretty much game over.
Yeah, and that's really unfortunate because he was just kind of a sitting duck at that point. And that is an interesting point you say about the ABS. They are now he realizes he's in too deep, doesn't really have anywhere to go with it, because once you're on the ABS, these cars don't like to change directions. And the 45 is going to whip it around to the outside track limits and try to rejoin safely.
Caution is out at lap number 9 here, about halfway through this race. Alessandrini is the current race leader. Hausil in 2nd. And assuming for that incident down in turn number 12. So just about halfway, this brings in a strategy component here, Tom. What's your thought if you're leading this race versus 10th in this race in either of the classes? What do you do different now?
Well, to me, the gloves are off now because we're in sprint race territory. It's going to be close to 15 minutes by the time we finish this caution period, and that's really going to bring this race to life. The question is, back to our keys to the race, who has tire left and who has the car left underneath them? These guys were just starting to get into lap traffic. You see the orange Porsche, or the yellow Porsche just in front, the 14 car. They were just about to start to get into lap traffic. That's going to bring them back to their own race with the pace car coming out, regrouping the field. I can't wait to see what Andrew Pilata can do on this restart with the power of that BMW, and I also can't wait to see where does Paul Darling end up, having hung on to 6th place, started to close that gap down. Last time across the line, he was only about 5.5 seconds behind the leader, but only 2.5 seconds behind Christopher Lapras. So he was really close to getting into that battle. Now he's going to be there.
So with our first caution out for the day, it's going to bring in a bit of a wrinkle into the strategy component here and probably take about 2 to 3 laps to clear up this yellow. So like you said, 15 to 13 minutes, I would assume, will be our green flag run to the end. I think short-term speed and long-term speed are very different things in stock cars or in sports cars, because especially if you have cooler tires or you come down to get new tires, which I'm not sure if that's worth doing, you can really kind of use up more of your equipment in a shorter span of time. But are pit stops even worth doing at this point?
No, I really don't think so with these cars. The Michelin tire compound lasts really well, and they expected to fall off maybe 1 second to 1.5 seconds overall with the full race going green. I don't think any of these drivers anticipated the full course caution, which means they likely won't have any sort of opportunity to plan to pit, do the mental math, figure out where they were as far as tire strat goes, and then with only 13 minutes left in the race, they're not going to be able to come back. If this was another hour, maybe so. But even in the TCR cars, if you burned your front tires down, you just kind of got to live with the bed you made. Back on the TCR front, though, speaking of, Elias Roman is the guy on the grid that really didn't want to see this happen. Probably is very surprised and disappointed to see that this yellow flag has come out, because Murphy Nichols, John Chrissy, Forrest Landy were all pretty close, and we're going to throw Peter Lausen in there as well. They all have an opportunity to close back up. The disadvantage for those drivers is I think they're going to have a couple GS cars or GT4 cars between the two of them.
Interesting note here on Murphy Nichols. Have a look at the best lap time column here. There is none. We've run 10 laps, and Murphy Nichols has not laid down a single clean lap. That tells me he has, at minimum, 10 incidents already, which we're halfway through this race, halfway through his incident count before a penalty. So Murphy should be careful, I would say, going to the end of this race.
Yeah, and we mentioned that the incident limits are not only for going off track, but if you happen to spin and lose control of your car, you usually will get 2 of those incident points. If you hit another driver, you will often get 4 of those points, which means if you start banging doors here towards the end of this race, we could absolutely see drive-through penalties start to come in. And I'm just watching the headlights on that BMW that sits third. Andrew Pilata giving a little warning to Ken Hausil, like, hey, I know we're racing now.
I'm so excited for a restart here into turn number 1. The initial start was relatively tame. We haven't really seen all that much attrition yet. And, well, like Larry Mack says in NASCAR, cautions breed cautions. So I'd be careful if I was mid-pack here, but if I'm Pilata, that restart is my time to go down there and just chuck it down the inside, stand on the ABS, and hope I can make something happen.
Absolutely, and the nice part about COTA, there's not a lot to hit. So outside of the other cars around you, those incidents that we've been seeing are fairly tame and fairly isolated to maybe 1 or 2 cars who they're going to go for a while and slide for a heck of a long time, but they're going to be able to rejoin. So I suspect a lot of these drivers are still in the race. We're probably still close to 40 cars circulating. We're going to lump them all back up. We're not even splitting them this time. All the TCR cars are starting in order with the GT4 cars. As we are finishing one of, I suspect we're going to see 3 of these caution laps.
We might only get 1 more. I know that they're typically shortened up pretty nicely, so we might get a 1 to green here at the start-finish line. So the Porsche pace car out up front, Alessandrini, Hausil, Pilata, Leighton, Lapras, your top 5 in GT4. Then in TCR, Elias Roman, Murphy Nichols, John Chrissy, Forrest Landy, Peter Lausen, your top 5. David Alessi, Will Robbins, Charles Beaulieu, John Willeman, there's a bit of a stack up here.
Yeah, big stack up. This is down the back straight, so a couple cars getting a wave around. You saw the one car shoot by that on the left. That is, I would say by instruction, but I'm not sure that he realized he might be doing the wrong thing. I was going to point out, if we go back to looking at Elias Roman, you see the pink Cayman and the blue Cayman right in the between of he and then the rest of the TCR grid. So that is going to be interesting if those drivers in second and third, being Murphy Nichols and John Chrissy, they have 2 GT4 cars to navigate before they can even think about challenging for the lead, and that's bad news. So although Elias Roman may not have wanted this caution or expected this caution, he's got a little bit of a buffer that can make him comfortable. The job for him is to protect his spot on track and keep those cars behind him.
So 15 minutes and 45 seconds left in this race, working lap number 10 of about 18. And these are relatively slow pace laps, so again, probably about 12 minutes to go if we get the 1 to green next time by. And that's not a whole lot of time for anybody to drive up through the field. I think if you're near the front, you could probably make a move to get to the inside. But again, I don't expect to see any sort of pit stop, so it's just going to be running to the end from here. But maybe a chance to cool off the tires, especially for the M4, cooling the rears off. Maybe this is a good chance to let everything fall back down to 10.
Yeah, I highly doubt that these drivers have done any sort of testing to see if the tires really come back much. It is going to help a bit, and again, the BMW being quick in a straight line, if you can get a good restart, which is a little tough here off of the final corner at COTA, being such a tight corner, but this is going to be his best shot of any, really, as he comes to the green flag for that restart.
So waiting to see if the lights extinguish on the pace car this time through across the start-finish line. We will get 2 more caution laps here around COTA, unless it gives us the 1 to green about halfway through the lap, which is a discrete possibility. So we'll look here high above here. We'll let the order scroll along the top of the screen for now. And just to give everyone a break for a moment up there. Well, there's the overall order at the top of your screen. We'll jump back down to the racetrack here in just a moment. But your thoughts so far on the pace of other drivers inside the top 15 in GT4 that we haven't really talked about yet? How about Evan Schickel in the 37? He'll restart right behind Christopher Lapras in the 183. Is he someone that we've been underestimating maybe?
Yeah, and he usually is really good at the end of these races to kind of turn it on and challenge. So his fastest lap is just a 10th off of the fastest laps of Christopher Lapras and Thomas Layton. Paul Darling has one of the fastest laps of the entire race. So that tells me that Evan Schickel should be able to challenge. Should Paul Darling maybe make an attack on the back of Lapras and Layton, maybe he'll be able to follow them through. The only caveat to that is the drivers at the front. I think we've really just seen kind of a cruise race so far. The front 6 have been running these low to mid 217s the entire duration of this race, even including up to that last time they came across the line before the yellow flag came out. Evan Schickel is the first driver that was not running 217s. His last lap was a 218.8. So Schickel may not have the car under him nearly as well. And then as we go back down through the rest of the top 15 and beyond, all the rest of the field was running 219s, 220s, and 21s. So that front pack, I don't think we've seen what they've got yet. The outlier to me is, have we seen what Andrew Pilata has? Because that car is obviously it is different than the rest of the cars in the top 6. The rest of them, we can kind of identify if all of them have been running the same pace. They're probably all cruising to about the same pace. We just don't know if Andrew Pilata had to work harder or not to be there.
So the field rolling around for its penultimate pace lap here. We should get the 1 to green next time by, but last time by the lap took 4 minutes. So that means that once we get around, we're probably gonna have, what, 5 or 6 minutes worth of racing left? That's really only about 3 laps worth of time around here. So that's going to increase the intensity just a little bit towards the end of this thing. Looking ahead towards our schedule, we head to Donington Park next week, then WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, Imola, Sebring, Olton Park, Suzuka, Monza, and Summit Point to round out the season. Kind of a diverse schedule, a couple international tracks here, so not quite as U.S. heavy. We head to Donington next week. That's a lot shorter of a lap compared to this longer lap here at COTA. Does that benefit the TCR or the GT4 driver more?
Well, I think in talking to everybody, it benefits the BMW more because the BMW can pound a couple of those curbs that are really important for fast lap times at Donington. And just as we look down through the rest of the season, there's a number of tracks that I think those who have driven the BMW for this race are going to be really excited about a couple of those other tracks. And I love that we're going global. We've got the UK in there, we've got Japan in there, we've got Italy in there a couple times. And then, of course, a couple of American classics, rounding out the season with a 1.2-hour endurance race at the home of Washington, D.C. region, Summit Point.
So we'll end things in Summit Point, Virginia. That's always a fun one. Of course, we don't have the Shenandoah circuit. We just have the full course there. And while it's looking quite 2004 form here in iRacing, it's still a fun racetrack. This one looking as 2012-ish as it was, pretty much scanned when it was constructed. And they've since changed some things. They've added some curbing in some areas and removed some of the AstroTurf, which is sort of a grip-reducing measure, but they've sort of just changed it to painted concrete in recent years. That kind of adjusts how you drive this racetrack a little bit, but you know, I think we're missing a couple racetracks on this schedule that were kind of staples. We're missing Watkins Glen, we're missing Road Atlanta, Road America didn't make it to the schedule. So I think mixing it up is going to be a new change for a lot of drivers who might not experience a track like Donington all that much, or a track like Imola, which for how new it is here at iRacing, it really doesn't get used a whole lot on the official schedule. So learning and adapting to new racetracks is going to be super important this season.
I think to me, Imola, Olton Park, and Monza really stand out as tracks that these drivers probably have never really seen. Suzuka's pretty classic as far as being in video games and being used in video games, even iRacing. Donington Park is pretty popular in video games in general, so I think some of these layouts are probably a little familiar. But Imola is, unless you've been a Formula One fan, I was not super exposed to Imola before it was started to get put into these video games more recently. Olton Park I knew from a video game, an obscure one I had a long time ago called TOCA Racing Driver, but I don't think a lot of these drivers would have seen or raced on that one extensively. And Monza, obviously well known from Formula One, but is just not really that popular as far as being used in American racing series, especially when it comes to sim racing. So the other interesting point of the season will be a 90-minute endurance race at Sebring International Raceway as the midpoint in the season, race 5. So we have 7 of these races will be 40-minute sprints, as we've seen tonight, a 90-minute in the middle, and then an hour and a half, or 1.2 hours, I should say, endurance race. So we got a big variety not only of tracks but of formats.
Well, one thing I'm noticing here for the restart, this will be a double file format restart. We're doing a NASCAR style here, which I've always liked double file restarts better than single file. I think especially with a field this big, we'll have more cars on the front straightaway, so you don't have half the field still heading through the carousel on the restart. And it also sort of cuts down on the front to back sort of checking up that you see a lot of times, and a lot of the gamesmanship is removed here. The one thing it does do, Tom, is it really encourages people starting 8th, 10th, 12th to chuck it up the inside and hope they can grab some spots.
Well, yeah, I think if you cut back to the aerial camera at some point, we'll be able to see, especially down at turn 1, it's just out of frame now, unfortunately, but maybe down towards turn 11, you can see the track gets really wide. It adds a couple car widths, and that's where we saw a couple of those incidents early on in lap number 1, and we may or may not, fingers crossed, knock on wood, no commentator's curse, may or may not see that as you said, we should be right around 5, maybe 5.5 minutes left at the green flag, which should be around 3 laps of racing. So we're going gloves off, full proper sprint racing at this point for the Washington, D.C. region to end this one off.
So 8 minutes left right now. Again, we'll have about 5, maybe 4.5 by the time we get the green, which will leave us with at least 2, maybe 3 laps worth of racing, depending on how quickly we finish this one up. Double file restart. Oh boy, it's gonna be a fun one.
Oh boy, indeed. And I think this double file restart may even play further into the hands of that green BMW. Just keep a close eye on how aggressive that car can get. There's another BMW that's in the top 10. I'm going to pull my timing and scoring back up so I can find the name. That's Ryan Maloney, and sitting in 8th. It's the white BMW, and both of those cars, I think, are going to have my attention as we come back to green flag racing. The rest of the Caymans are pretty known quantity. Obviously, it's basically spec racing between them. But a couple of those BMWs thrown in there changes everything.
A little bit of damage to the nose of the number 8 of Ryan Maloney, looking back to find Dave Fitzgerald, who's probably has the most beat-in nose of anybody out there, but still making it work, running 16th right now. Ryan Maloney's alongside him. Alex LaRose, remember, he spun early after contact with, I believe it was Paul Darling. He'll restart in 10th on driver's right. And I don't hate being on driver's right here because of the way turn 1 is laid out here, Tom. The next corner is a right-hander. That's a long sweeping corner. So I don't hate being on driver's right. If you can stick out there, then the run down to turn 2, I think you can nose ahead.
Yeah, you can definitely get the slingshot around the outside, and that also brings us to that incident limit. If the drivers were fairly conservative early on, which I think you can pretty much guarantee these guys in the top 10, at least in the top 5, were pretty careful through that beginning of the race. If they've got some incident points to burn, we might start to see those track limits kind of fly out the window, because if we're racing for 3 laps and you can go off track a couple times a lap and gain a couple of tenths, gain an advantage, you can bet that these guys are going to do that.
Coming through the carousel now, coming to the restart as we work lap number 12 of approximately, I guess, 14 to 16 here in the closing moments of this race. On driver's left is the red number 61. That's the Hawk Performance Grid Life sponsored number 61. Then Ken Seal on the other side, running the Carceps number 23 as he negotiates his way through and towards turn number 19. Pick me a winner, Tom. Who wins this race, DJ, Ken, or somebody else?
Oh, you just throw all the names in a hat, shuffle it around, and pull one out. We have no idea what's going to happen. It could be all the way back to Schickel, Maloney, and Kuracek by the time this thing is done. We're coming into turn number 20 to go green flag racing for 2 to 3 laps. This is going to be good.
The field works their way through turn number 20, and DJ Alessandrini's already going. Green flag back in the air for the restart here as we come to what should be about 3 laps to go, and DJ goes all the way down to the wall to try to break the draft. The rest of the field scrambles towards the start-finish line. The TCR car is all jumbled up, and the 99 comes over to protect on, looks like that's the 5 of Murphy Nichols.
Yeah, look at that. Murphy Nichols was able to actually get up to the bumper of Elias Roman, so we got to keep an eye on that in the background. But DJ Alessandrini didn't even wait for a semblance of a green flag. He went as soon as we came out of turn number 20, hit the acceleration zone, and said, "Bye, guys, I'm going." And now he's starting to break away just a little bit. Look at him pushing really hard. The tire's a little cool now. They got to be remembering to keep the cars nice and under control. The big loser in that one, Andrew Pilata, somehow fell all the way back down to 8th, 9th or something like that. No, someone's going for a ride. We're getting rowdy here.
Yeah, shortcut there. Whoa, there's another car that went hard off. Was that Cristobal Rodriguez? Yeah, he just went way off in the S as he gets back, rolling some significant damage on the nose of that car. Roman leads in TCR. No GT4s between him and John Christie, who slotted himself into second. And now it's going to be a 3-horse race up at the front of TCR. No, 4, 5, 6 cars going for it now as they have to battle behind the GT4 traffic. And Elias Roman has a roadblock with a car off on the inside. The 25 car of Ryan Maloney has nosed his way into the Armco.
And this is going to be the story of the rest of this race for the TCR drivers, dealing with traffic and battling amongst themselves. Murphy Nichols was able to get a good start, but Chrissy comes around and gets up into second position. And Roman now dealing with a nightmare from both the front and the back, having to navigate not only slower GT4 cars, but an attacking rest of the TCR field.
Yeah, let's watch the braking zone here before we take you back up to the GT4 race lead. This is where I think the TCR cars make a lot of speed. John Chrissy hard on the brakes. Look at how much he closes behind him. A battle for third. Forrest Landy up the inside of Murphy Nichols. He takes that spot away. Now Peter Lausen from behind has a look. And this is a great fight. Murphy Nichols looked to the inside and maybe spooked Forrest Landy off the racetrack.
Yeah, I think he spooked him definitely, but those drivers they started to do a good job not interrupting each other much. They didn't slow down, but now between the two of them, they've lost touch a bit, as now I think that's Fitzgerald. Dave Fitzgerald goes for a ride on the back of that BMW, just gets a power down a little too early and goes for a spin. But the battle in TCR is raging. Ken Hauseal has also closed the gap back up to DJ Alessandrini, so Alessandrini, despite trying to get away, did his best efforts. Now we're starting to see those drivers flirting with track limits coming out of turn 20. I think we're going to have, yes, definitely 2 laps to go. I wouldn't be surprised to see these drivers all sorts of off the track.
Look at Paul Darling on the outside of Thomas Layton, going to try to cross him up here on corner exit, get a good run here. If he can get by this 44, he could certainly have a chance to win this race, but he's not quite through yet. He'll have to be patient towards at least turn number 11.
Yeah, touched the curb on the inside of turn 1, and that kind of blew his over-under attempt, but the 155 has to get by the 44 as quickly as possible, because Layton doesn't look like he's able to stick to the back of Alessandrini and Hauseal, but you can guarantee that Darling has the pace. If he can slip through and those two start racing, we'll have a 3-horse race. And they're now coming up to one of the best passing opportunities. They're only going to come to turn 11 once more after this one. This is a good passing chance for Ken Hauseal, but can he make anything happen? I'm sorry, Darling, or can he make anything happen?
Well, Darling will have to have a look at Layton. Not going to dive in just yet. Maybe he'll try to get him down towards turn number 12. Another good passing opportunity. Elias Roman right now is trying to put as many GT4 cars between him and second place John Christie as he can. He's got Darren Heath playing rear gunner right now, and he's got about a 7/10 of a second lead over that number 6 car.
Gets the car rotated nicely down into the turn number 11, so he's got some tire left. The guys behind, you see him just plowing off the track. I think that was Chrissy running wide as he's trying to defend from Landy. Murphy Nichols has seemed to have dropped out of this race somewhere along the last lap since we left this battle, but this is turning into a race for second place.
Ooh.
Between these two, the battling, almost bump drafting. They touch just a little bit before the braking zone.
They're leaning on each other. Car off the racetrack in front of them. Big dive on the outside for Forrest Landy. Completes the pass on the outside of turn number 12. What a great move there. Sam Scott has found his way turned around. Murphy Nichols had a loop and maybe some contact earlier in that lap. You see the left front damage, as you mentioned, Tom. Let's go back to GT4. Ken Hauseal is all over the rear bumper of DJ Alessandrini. They'll be coming to the white flag this time through.
Well, when Alessandrini grabbed too much curb on the way in, you saw the car did not want to get down to the apex at turn 19. Now this curb, you can use all of it, and that's going to bring these guys around for the white flag. And there it is. Ken Hauseal says, screw track limits, I'm going for speed now. Runs all the way out to the grass and brings the car onto the front straight. Does he have enough of a draft to poke out? DJ Alessandrini not looking very protective. He actually wants the outside lane, it looks like.
Here he comes into turn number 1, the 23 on driver's left. Going to have to go the short way around. Alessandrini will get the power down. They still have overlap here. Now Alessandrini re-clears Ken Hauseal. Paul Darling still unable to get by Layton here, but the battle is still tight. Less than a car length between the race leaders.
Layton doing a great job holding off one of the fastest drivers in GT4 cars that we know, but this battle between these two, there's nothing happening really between this whole section of the S's. Nothing but a mistake. As you can see, Layton gets a little bit wide. Darling trying it, but this is just really single file racing through here. The key is getting set up for on the brakes down into turn number 11. And it looks like Darling has started this over-under back and forth, gets a great run off of turn number 9. Oh, a little bit of a wiggle though, that might throw it away, and Lapras is there to potentially capitalize. But I think Darling has a little bit of a buffer, goes for the look and deep on the brakes, shoves it in there. At this point, he says, I just need to get a podium, but he's too deep and over-under for Layton. Does Lapras get the run too?
Yeah, too deep of a move there. Couldn't hang on to it. He's going to pull into the draft, and Lapras is going to follow him down there. Not quite close enough to have a look at Darling, but Darling wants to go back by 3/10, make it 4/10 between Hauseal and Alessandrini, but the battle is now for third place. Layton and Darling drag racing to turn number 12.
Whoa, and they're both moving around a lot on the brakes. Layton was super deep and does a really good job to get the car slowed down to the apex. And Paul Darling's going to have to wait for his opportunity. A couple more corners. Hauseal almost touches Alessandrini at the apex of 13. They're now sweeping over under. This is the stadium section, and Hauseal's up the inside.
Oh, he's going to be there side by side through turn number 15. Alessandrini runs way off the racetrack. Now he's got driver's right for the carousel. Final time through the long right-hander, 16, 17, 18. And 2 corners left for Alessandrini and Hauseal. Into the turn number 19. The 23 runs a little bit wide. Going to try to apex. Ladies off too far. Going to have to pull the car back on course. Alessandrini leads through 19. Hauseal going to give it one more shot at turn number 20. And not going to be able to do it. He has a slowdown there, Tom.
Yeah, he's slowing down at the apex. He's actually got to bleed that time off before the start-finish line, and that means that Leighton and Darling might actually have a run at him, but the checkered flag, DJ Alessandrini, all the way down towards the back. Who gets second, though? Leighton, I think, might have got it.
Start-finish line's a little farther back. How Seal scored was second. Leighton third, Paul Darling in fourth. Here's Elias Roman. He's got Forrest Landy right behind him. Final corner here. GT4 traffic up the road. Not going to be enough. Elias Roman, checkers. After starting in first, he'll finish first and win at Circuit of the Americas. Peter Lausen will jump up into, well, actually, he had maybe reset, but it'll be Chrissy third, Forrest Landy second, Peter Lausen fourth, and David Alessi looks like he'll grab fifth. Well, that didn't disappoint.
No, that was great to reset with that checker. As long as we had to wait for that yellow flag to clear itself out, it absolutely brought the heat. And that was just an amazing last couple of laps. Really impressed. Darling able to make it all the way up to fourth, but Thomas Leighton held him off and earned that third place finish. I was a little confused as to which start-finish line we were using. Looks like Ken Houseel actually had a much larger margin of victory than I thought to bring home second, and Alessandrini put his foot down and, as we suspected, started to use a little bit more of the track than was allowed earlier. Had some incident points to burn, and that, you know, both drivers kind of tried to utilize that, but it was Alessandrini that got the nod.
Elias Roman in the number 99 TCR car. He led from the green to the checkers, and he had to hold off quite a few attacks as well as climb through a lot of GT4 traffic to get there, so he gets it done. Forrest Landy second, John Chrissy in third. And a disappointing end for Murphy Nichols. Had been running up in second for most of the race, and at the tail end of it, got himself involved in some kind of kerfuffle and fell back. Will finish eighth, which I'm sure he'll be disappointed, but he had a strong run going.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with how cool Elias Roman was able to play it during that race. I'm sure if when we talk to him, he's going to say, I was just dodging bullets left and right the entire race between the battles that he had coming at him from behind and then more so the GT4 cars that he had to navigate that entire race. So impressed for him to keep it cool and smooth and bring it home despite a lot of pressure from all sides. But an also really, really nice move from Forrest Landy around the outside on turn 12 to then bring it back into second place. Just nodding out John Chrissy from third.
Peter Lausen comes home in fourth, his first race here in the DC Region Virtual Racing League, so a good start to the season for him. David Alessi brings home a top five. Will Robbins, Charles Boley, Murphy Nichols, 6th, 7th, and 8th in class. John Williman, Daniel Huertas, not such good races, but still a long way to go in the season. This is only the first of many rounds that we'll have this year. We'll be back in just a moment for interviews. Hang tight, we'll be right back. Back live here at SimTV for the Washington, D.C. Region SCCA Virtual Racing League here now with our third place finisher, bronze step on the podium for John Chrissy in the number 6 car. Well, tonight was a pretty wild race, got a full course yellow to mix things up just a little bit, but third place, first race here in the series, got to be pretty happy with that result.
Oh yeah, no, it was a great race. The yellow kind of threw me. I was pretty lucky coming down the back straight. I passed Forrest literally right before the yellow came out. So became a little bit lucky for me, but yeah, that was a total throw up, throw up. It was a total just kind of out of the middle of nowhere kind of thing. Made it interesting. So very happy.
That restart, especially with the double file format that I'm sure nobody was expecting. Tell me about that restart and the franticness of having to find space, especially racing some of that GT4 traffic.
Oh yeah, no, it was pretty crazy. I think I got a little bit bad luck off the start. Ended up in fourth, and then coming into T1, I came around the outside and passed. I think both Forrest and Murph, so was able to get right up behind Elias. But going into the S's, you just get a total accordion effect with the GT4. So you get a little bit of slower GT4s coming through there. It's an accordion effect. I tapped Elias a little bit, but it's crazy. It bunched up the whole field, and it kind of threw a little bit of a wrench into my into the game plan. So kind of had to back off and play it a little bit safe.
Played it safe, but got a third place out of it. Jack, hey, thanks for talking to us. Congratulations. We'll see you next week at Donington.
Thank you.
Move on now to our race winner in TCR. That would be Elias Roman in the number 99, who gets it done, leads from the green to the checkers. Had to do a lot of work to get there, Elias. Walk us through holding off the drivers behind you. Then the caution comes out, and you got to do it all over again on a restart in the midst of GT4 traffic.
Hey, Kyle and Tom, thanks. Yeah, the start was kind of key to manage the car on cold tires and also to pull enough of a gap so they can utilize my toe. Then I was kind of just in cruise control until that full course yellow surprisingly came out. And then I was kind of on pace and almost faster than some of the GS cars, but I couldn't really attack because they just had to bunch on me out of the streets. So I kind of focus more on defending my spot against the other TCRs than try to get by the GS. But yeah, it was fun, and happy to get the win.
Tom, any questions for Elias before we let him go?
Yeah, I was going to say, just talk to us about the dodging not only the battles and attacks from behind, but from ahead too, dealing with GT4 cars that, for the rest of the season, we'll probably see that start to play out throughout. So that's just an added level for the GT4 cars or for the TCR cars. But talk to us about that balance.
It's kind of picking and choosing your battles. That's the best way I could describe it. I kind of know where I'm better than some of the GS cars and where they're better than me. So it's also kind of like a trust thing that I know that they'll wait until the straight to get by me instead of dive by me in a quarter. So it's kind of like give and take. But yeah, just basically be smart about positioning the car and choosing your battles.
Elias, thanks for talking to us. Good luck to you this season. Off to a very strong start, one win at COTA. We'll see you at Donington next week.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Sure thing. We're going to move on now to our third place finisher in GT4, Tom Layton, who battled with Paul Darling there in the closing laps. Tom, congratulations on a podium finish here to start the season off. Take us through the race, the restart, and the battle with Paul Darling there at the end. That looked like a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks. Man, the battle really started before the restart. Andrew Pilata, on the first lap, he made it into third, and it was just a struggle to kind of even put myself in a position to pass him because he was super fast throughout the whole lap. And man, that BMW just pulls away so hard on the straight. I could never get in a position to pass him. So then we had the yellow flag. Unfortunately, it seemed like Andrew had some kind of track cut penalty or something after that. So he slowed down, and then Paul Darling was right on my heels the whole race. I mean, he had probably a few tenths per lap pace on me, but I think I managed to defend pretty well in the braking zones and managed to hold out for just a few laps. So yeah, it was exciting.
Tom, anything for the other Tom before we let him go?
No, just congratulations on an impressive performance. Hope you get to run the full season.
Guys.
All right, we move on now to second place, Ken House-Seal, who came up about a second and a half short in the closing moments after getting a penalty in turn number 19. Gave it everything you had, Ken. You had the inside run a couple times on that final lap, but that battle with DJ just couldn't quite finish it off today. Take us through the battle.
So my plan was to make a move on the last corner by carrying a ton of speed through 19, but DJ checked up a little more than I was expecting, and to just not kill him, I just drove around the outside and took the course cut, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. Really fun. It seemed like I had a little bit of an advantage towards the end of the race. Just saved my tires a bit better earlier. Planning on making moves towards the end, and yellow flag kind of screwed up some of that, and then it was, yeah, just not great.
Yeah, really long caution period, unfortunately. But we head to Donington Park next week for our second round of the season. With what the car counts we had 45 cars in the race. Do you think a car count that high is going to be a bigger distraction next week with a racetrack that probably isn't quite as good at handling this many cars?
That's a good question. Depends. I guess it depends on what layout we're using. If we're using the hairpin, well, I guess the new hairpin, it's going to be a mess. The fast flowy layout's difficult to pass on, but at least it races kind of fun. So.
All right, well, second place for Ken Ausil after starting in second. Couldn't quite get past DJ. Ken, congratulations. We'll see you next week.
Guys.
And finally, last but certainly not least, DJ Alessandrini. Started first, finished first. At the last lap, I thought there might have been a chance for Ken to get by you, but you placed the car in a very specific place in turn number 1. You chose to let Ken have the inside. That seemed like it held off Ken just long enough for you to keep that lead and hang on for the win. So take us through your race, the tactics to keep the 23 behind you, and then how the yellow flag might have thrown that off just a little bit.
I mean, the yellow flag surprised me, even though I accidentally found out about it beforehand. I just completely forgot. So no unfair advantage there. And basically, I was just trying to put in the best laps I could and save a bunch of incident points for the end of the race. When the yellow came out, I've only used 6 incident points, so I still had 19 to use before I had to queue a penalty. And then basically at the end, my strategy was to always be on the outside of the corner because I can just run wide using an incident point and just have better position leaving it. When you're on the inside, it's kind of hard to judge exactly how wide the guy next to you is going to run, so you kind of have to be more conservative on it. But when you're on the outside at COTA, you just let it fly, so you have the advantage on the outside if you're abusing track limits. Basically, Kyle, it was a game, and I gamed it, and I won.
Well, DJ, you're pretty good at doing that. Good luck to you next week at Donington. That'll be an interesting one, a track that I'm sure people don't have quite as much experience with some of the other tracks we've run on the schedule. So congrats on your first win of the season. I'm sure there'll be several more. Good luck to you there. We'll see you.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Tom.
All right, that'll do it for the interviews here tonight. And Tom, one thing I wanted to address briefly before we wrap things up is DJ mentions the gamesmanship. He comes from a professional gaming background, and when he refers to the incident points, it's interesting to me the way that he talks about them. It's like they're a non-renewable, I mean, they're a non-renewable resource that he has used to his advantage. Basically, he understands that they are a resource, and if you don't use them, you're not really driving to the full capability of the race car, because running wide sometimes might help you run faster, and if you're not doing it, then you're not really utilizing all the tricks up your sleeve. So interesting note by DJ there to kind of treat those incidents like a resource that are there to help you.
Well, sure. We talked about that on the restart. We suspected to see the drivers really start to use more of the track, knowing if they had those incident points to burn, they absolutely could do so within the rules. And I think it takes one person to maybe set the rules up that way and know that is a possibility, but it takes another type of person to utilize it to their advantage. And I suspect that because DJ was in the lead position, he had the strategy and the choice to use those in a specific way, as you said, to really game the system and use them up as an unrenewable resource, just like your tires, just like your fuel, whatever else it may be. And I guarantee you Ken had the same plan, but didn't have the advantage on track position to put himself in the positions he would have wanted. And I think that will start to see seep down, from the top. The guys that everybody look up to, they're going to see what happened this race, and we'll start to see that actually start to take effect more and more throughout the rest of the season.
Well, next week, of course, we head to the Donington Park circuit, and that's going to be a really interesting one because, again, as I mentioned before, it's not a racetrack that is seen. There's a lot of racetracks on this schedule that drivers don't see a lot in regular schedules in the iRacing service. So that throws a little bit of a wrench into things. It's not super familiar, so that's going to maybe mix up the running order a little bit next week.
It's also very narrow, and it has the walls much closer to the edge, so it's a much higher risk track. As Ken alluded to, it doesn't necessarily race nearly as well as COTA does because there are very few obvious passing zones. There are very few obvious big braking zones. So you have to get a little more creative. But the other thing we're going to see specifically in GT4 is maybe that BMW start to come alive a little bit more. And we're going to get really into the swing of this 9-week season where the best 6 races start to count.
Well, we're going to see that race kick off again next week at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much for watching the first round of the Washington, D.C. Region SCCA Virtual Racing League from Circuit of the Americas. I'm Kyle Heyer with Tom O'Gorman. We'll see you next time here on Sim TV. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you from England next week.